Gears of War 4 is coming out. Can you believe it's been 10 years since the original game? It's crazy to think that there's been 1, 2, 3, even 4 games covering the emulsion-laced world of Sarah. So I think it's worth a trip down memory lane to remember the Delta team, the Locusts, the Jacks, and the Carmines in one of the most beloved third-person shooter action horror video games there is. In the early 2000s, Epic Games were doing work. They had since released the 3D FPS Unreal, which spawned a series of Unreal games, including Unreal Tournament and an engine of the same name. They were looking to create a fresh IP utilizing the Unreal Engine 2, and created the building blocks of a military-themed game focusing on territory control. Unreal Engine lead programmer James Golding stated the team was making a class-based Battlefield-style game, with a focus on multiplayer and a deployable mech. They called it Unreal Warfare. Sounds pretty good. But Epic had to turn their focus to the Unreal Tournament series for a time, and when they returned to the project, they came to the conclusion that a single-player game would be a better direction. A decision that was widely stressed by up-and-coming designer Cliff Bleszinski. Influenced by 3 key titles, Bleszinski began to mold Unreal Warfare to something a bit out of Epic's comfort zone. First was a cover-based system inspired by Kill Switch to mix up the standard military shooter gameplay. Next, Bionic Commando's movement, specifically moving from platform to platform to get closer to the objective. But the biggest of these 3 is Resident Evil 4, which not only changed the perspective to over the shoulder, but began a shift in tone to a dark and brooding horror game. Eventually, Unreal was dropped off the title altogether, and Warfare made its debut at GDC 2002, revealing 4 soldiers exploring dark catacombs and caves in a sci-fi post-apocalyptic scenario. But the game would keep cooking for another 4 years, being reworked and retooled from less of a traditional army game to something a bit more sci-fi, a bit more gory, a bit more chainsaw gunny. They had to fight for it, but Epic Games pushed hard to keep the little chainsaw that could, and they were rewarded with a positive reaction at E3 2005. Now on to the Unreal Engine 3, Epic Games had their sights set on convincing Microsoft to increase the RAM of the Xbox 360 from 256 megabytes to 512, so the game could run in 720 glorious p. They also added Rob Ferguson as executive producer for the series, and then it was up to the team to finish the game in time for a holiday release in 2006. On November 7th, 2006, Gears of War made its debut on the Xbox 360. Locust Queen Mira tells the tale of an ongoing war between humanity and underground-dwelling reptilian humanoids, the Locust Horde. In between the lines, however, this story is one of constant war and struggle, not just between species, but between humanity itself. A short history of the planet Sarah reveals a violent past between 2 competing governments. It abruptly ends when one of them uses the Hammer of Dawn to just wipe out another city and force a treaty. Not long after that treaty was Emergence Day, where locusts executed a planned attack across the planet, taking out a lot of humans. This event basically sets the tone for a dark and desperate time, where a small group of soldiers within the Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COGS, lead a Hail Mary mission to save the world.
Jack, break that door.
The journey begins with Marcus Fenix, a former war hero, now imprisoned for abandoning his post about 14 years from that fateful Emergence Day. After being broken out by his friend, Dominic "Dom" Santiago, he leads a ragtag team of soldiers, including the feisty tech specialist Baird and the old thrashball hero Coltrane, on a journey to discover a weakness within the Locust Horde and come to terms with teamwork and trust.
I'll be sure to take that under advisement, Gus. Now move it.
Yes, sir!
Mechanically, this game really sets itself apart from other shooters at the time. It had a focus on moving between points for cover. You grow to love inanimate objects like car doors and bricks of concrete, because it's your only refuge from the buckets of bullets being poured out from enemy bases. Battles required tactics and observation of surroundings for success, such as pushing a car down an alley for cover. With 4 weapon slots, players got to freely pick up and try a variety of weapons, quite fresh to contemporary shooters. You might get excited to use your Lancer gun, which had an attached chainsaw, only to be enamored with explosive torque bows or the impacty feel of the Hammer of Dawn. The guns also came with a nice added touch of a reload minigame, where pressing a button at the right time gave you additional damage. But messing up that button press embarrassed you plenty.
Shit!
The enemies were something out of a sci-fi horror that would both excite you and make your skin crawl. There's not too many feelings like the first time being trapped in a building with a berserker and learning you can't just shoot him to death. Small, speedy wretches move quickly and release the most upsetting scream. And there's nothing quite like the entrance of a corpser. Split Screen and Xbox Live offered co-op play. You could continue the next mission alone or co-op without losing your place. There's also team-based multiplayer for up to 8 players, which was added in development at the last minute, by the way. Between multiplayer and the full campaign, there was more than enough run-and-gun action to please fans. And please fans it did.
Damn, turn that shit off.
People likey the Gears. It was a hit the day it was released, selling 1 million copies in its first 2 weeks, and eventually go on to sell almost 6 million worldwide just 2 years later. Critically, it was also well received, with it winning multiple awards, including GameSpot's Game of the Year. There was also a PC release with added chapters, but that one didn't sell so well, so let's move on. Yes, everything was coming up Millhouse for Epic Games. With all that praise, it seemed only natural that a sequel would be right around the corner, especially considering the ending left us with pretty much a huge cliffhanger. Although the Delta Squad did succeed in releasing a light mass bomb in the heart of the Locust tunnels, Queen Locust Mira escaped, and she plotted her revenge.
But to survive is to endure and prosper, and we have most certainly survived.
On the exact date 2 years after the original game released, Gears of War 2 launched for the Xbox 360. Following the story from the first game, Mira regroups the Locust Horde and finds a new way to attack humanity, from underground.
It's a giant worm!
Reasonably called a riftworm, to eat away at the dirt under the last city, Jacinto, and sink it. We come back to our friends, the Delta Squad, plus a squeaky clean new Carmine to take down the worm. Mechanically, this game isn't too far from the original, staying true to the cover-based gameplay that we're used to. Besides a few new guns, not that we should ignore the flamethrower or anything, and some new vehicles, you're playing something that should feel pretty similar. It's more about how the environments lend themselves to the story and set the game apart. Almost immediately, you're riding assault derricks and being attacked by mortars and reavers. Walking through the Locust tunnels and inside a riftworm creates a nice change of scenery for the game, even if it's pretty dark and depressing and a little gooey down there. Riding a reaver in Brumac is truly the cherry on top of a wild adventure for this crew. But the second in the series is where the writing really starts to connect the heart of the Delta Squad with their place in this war-torn world. Regardless of how bad the circumstances get, Cole's always got a good line.
Shit, I saw these locust bitches some process.
Flashbacks to Dom and his wife convey a sense of peace and happiness, only to find that she's in grave danger. Most of the game is spent searching for her, which culminates in one of the most emotional scenes of the entire series. But it also helps pave the way for the emotional roller coaster of the crew in their final struggles. We get a better look at Lambent, who are locusts mutated by exposure to emulsion, and they don't particularly care for humans, or locusts. In a series surrounded by war, it seems only natural that the locusts and Lambent would also be at odds. With Jacinto very likely to fall anyway, Marcus makes the call to sink Jacinto and flood the locust base, turning the tide of a losing battle. Mira and some of the Horde still manage to escape, leading up to what will be the culmination of a brutal and bloody war.
One can only hope that one leaves behind a lasting legacy. But so often, the legacies that we leave behind are not the ones that we intended.
So this is how it ends.
On September 20th in 2011, the highly anticipated third and final part of the trilogy starts off with an incredible dark and depressing scenario. It pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the game. Humanity is now in crisis and trying to find a safe place of refuge. Both Locust and Lambent are out for blood, forcing a difficult journey for Marcus and Dom, who try to get to an island as everything around them is crumbling. Lambent take a larger role in this game, being much more aggressive with humanity in an attempt to just wipe them out. The Lambent's a good way to change up the gameplay, because they tend to explode or run really fast or just be really creepy in general. And as expected, Gears mixes up traditional gameplay by putting the player in spectacular locations, large barges moving across the sky, and submarines under the surface of the water. And they also added iced tea, which is just a really good touch.
Got some nerve coming around here asking for favors, motherfuckers.
You also get another deep dive into the Delta Squad and their motivations, and a character long overdue for his personal victory gets one. The main story arc, though, focuses around Marcus trying to get to his father, a man who's been part of the journey the whole time, just mostly in audio records and technologies. But the real relationship has always been in front of us the whole time. A story of two war heroes working together through conflict and death, working together to make something better for humanity. It's not only halfway through this game that Dom makes a choice that will dramatically change the face of the battle, and the series forever. Marcus carries on to find his father Adam and come to terms with what he's been working on. Although Adam's been working against his will to help the Locusts, he also created a device that can take out everything. Locust, lambent, emulsion, all of it. All of it's gotta go. Not after Marcus has lost so much, he's gotta come to terms with what his father has done, and what he has to do to prevent humanity from total annihilation. Marcus's anger comes to a head in a final battle between him and Mira. It's a short but satisfying battle. And that's pretty much it. Humanity is saved, but it's really just the scraps of what's left of it. There's really not much left of a future, but at least there is one. With the trilogy wrapped up, it makes sense that you'd see some changes behind the scenes. In 2012, Cliff Bleszinski announced his departure from Epic Games. Epic teamed up with People Can Fly to work on a fourth entry in the Gears of War series by 2013. There's just not as much to say about Judgment, not just because the game isn't as beloved as the original trilogy, but also because mechanically and thematically it really differentiates from the first three games. Open environments are replaced with smaller contained areas, and those themselves are contained within 6 chapters of the campaign. It's also the only game where you only have 2 weapon slots instead of 4, changing up a few things considered quite Gears, an attempt to mix up the series. The story also takes a turn in the form of flashbacks from Baird and other team members that begin from before the events of the very first game. It's nice to look into the other aspects of Baird and Cole's personality, as well as a deeper glimpse into the lore of Sarah and increasing tensions within humanity before the war. Overall, it's a game that favors action over immersion. You'll be sawing a lot of dudes in half, but the heart of the story isn't really in there. And that's the thing about Gears. You come to know and love certain things about each game, knowing you'll find cog tags hidden throughout the world, knowing that you'll see a Carmine and root for that survival, knowing that you'll depend on Jack to open a door, and knowing you're gonna hear the name Anya.
Anya.
We kind of get ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place, where we just want the Gears that we already love, but we don't want the same thing either. Epic created everything Gears for 7 years. But on January 27, 2014, Microsoft announced the purchase of the entire Gears of War franchise from Epic Games. Rob Ferguson was thrown in to sweeten the deal to oversee the franchise at the studio, The Coalition. At E3 2015, Rob talked about the new look for Gears of War 4 and the setting, which is 25 years after Gears of War 3, with Marcus's son now the lead character. Everyone recently got a peek at 20 minutes of footage from the Prologue, which is a look into the central moments in the Gears timeline, including Emergence Day and a battle from the Pendulum Wars. After the Prologue, though, everything's kind of a mystery. We'll have to wait until October 11th to see how they've treated the world of Sarah and the remaining people that reside there. We've seen reboots time and time again. We've seen trilogies unable to be touched. We've seen half-assed attempts at capitalizing on a known franchise. But with Gears, there's always the ability to make something with meaning, something with heart, and something we'll talk about for years to come. Please be good.
Oh, son.